Hey everyone, we have a Scorpio full moon coming up in just a few hours at 11:42 p.m. this evening, May 3rd. So it'll be a little earlier in some parts, that's East Coast time, and then May 4th in some parts of the world, but around midnight tonight. And I hope you guys are doing okay. I know I'm feeling the intensity of this. It's been the buildup of the last couple of weeks and probably will continue. But I really feel that understanding the timestamp that this represents for all of us relative to our collective and individual journeys is going to be very helpful in terms of just feeling okay and excited and hopeful about what's coming up and what this is archetypically reflecting to us. So here's my thoughts on this, because this is, I know I say this a lot, it's a very powerful moon. It is a very powerful moon. This is this moon has tremendous frequencies attached to it. And Judy Hall, one of my favorite astrologers, wrote a book called The Hades Moon. I would call this a Hades moon. Now, she defines a Hades moon as a moon that is aspected to Pluto. And in fact, this full moon is in a fairly good orb aspect to Pluto, sextile by 3 degrees. And it's in the sign that Pluto rules, Scorpio. So this is like a double whammy, double signature of the Hades moon signature. And when I first discovered her book, this was years ago, it kind of saved my life because I have a Hades moon as well. I just want to read you some of the chapter headings because it gives you an idea of like, what does she mean by Hades moon? Basically, we're talking about the archetype of Scorpio on a very deep level because, the archetype of Scorpio ruled by Pluto. Pluto is the god of the underworld, Hades. And let's see if I can find the chapters here. When we go down, we're involved in a journey into the underworld where we are facing our deepest traumas and fears of the past. And Scorpio, by being willing to undertake that depth of journey, then we understand the cycles of life and death. It's all about metaphorical life and death. And it is through that level of journeying that we have the deepest healing and also the deepest transformation. So I should have cleaned my glasses off before I did this video. They're really messy. I think my son got his sticky hands all over them. Anyway, for example, chapter 1, she calls by the light of the slightly tarnished moon. Chapter 2, the mythic moon, and so on, the devouring moon, the rejecting moon, the racing moon. The raging moon. See, I need to clean my glasses. The karmic moon, the cathartic moon, the sacred moon, and the renaissance moon, meaning simply the idea of revitalizing from the perspective of that Scorpio death rebirth energy. And if you have any planets or angles at around the mid degrees of the fixed signs, in other words, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, with hovering around 2 or 3 degrees of 15 degrees of Scorpio, Taurus, Leo, and Aquarius, you may be resonating with some of these themes. I know that one of the themes that came up for me that I resonated deeply with was the karmic moon. I have been feeling that there's unfinished business that is being completed with this. So yay, time to celebrate. I love that idea. So this journey that we are in the middle of, we are all undertaking, and that this full moon in Scorpio is illuminating certain aspects of. As we go into the underworld and we face our fears and we integrate the shadow, then we're able to connect with the creative aspect of life, the creativity of life, in a way that's so much more powerful and so much stronger than ever before. So that's what I want to talk about today, because there's a lot of hope and excitement with this idea, and it's very palpable. I feel it. So let's look at the chart together. I'm going to put the chart up here right now, and you can see that we have a tight T-square between the moon and Jupiter and the sun. All right, so I have talked about T-squares recently, maybe just in my last video. Remember, I talked about how this aspect does create a lot of tension. It's very visible, it's undeniable, it can't be ignored. So you've got a square between the moon and Jupiter, and you've got a square between the sun and Jupiter, and then the sun and moon are opposite each other. So very palpable tension, but it's like a three-legged table. It's a little wobbly. And the key to stabilizing this energy and manifesting the productivity and the creativity that's really inherent in this T-square, which is what I want to talk about more, is to bring and incorporate in that fourth point, which would be 13.5 degrees of Aquarius. So we're looking at the mid degrees of the fixed signs. These are powerful points of portals of energy for creatively manifesting something, or manifesting our creativity, I should say, is a better way of saying it, in a way that's enduring and long-lasting and reliable and more stable. Those are characteristics of the fixed energy. Now, I put up another chart here because Western astrology, and I want to talk about this a little bit because it's talking more about this fixed energy that I just mentioned. Western astrology is largely based, as we know, on the rhythms and cycles of the seasons relative to the Earth's journey with the sun, which, because of the tilt of the Earth's axes, gives us this marvelous experience of seasons. Now, even if not everywhere in the world, like the equator, the pulse is strong and it affects everyone. So the cardinal signs of Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn initiate or bring in the new season. So 0 degrees Aries brings in spring, the vernal equinox. 0 degrees Cancer is on the summer solstice and brings in summer. 0 degrees Libra on the fall equinox brings in fall or autumn. And then 0 degrees Capricorn on the winter solstice initiates winter. These are really powerful activation points. They get things going. And then the fixed cross are the signs that follow immediately after this more aggressive cardinal energy. Now, what the fixed signs do is they stabilize and ground what the cardinal energy has activated. So for Aries, we move to Taurus, fixed sign of Taurus. And then from Cancer, we move to the fixed sign of Leo. And from Libra, we move to the fixed sign of Scorpio. And from Capricorn, we move to the fixed sign of Aquarius, the fixed cross. Now, the fixed signs could be said to be the most creative in the chart, because what they do is they take what started and they really create and build something with it that will last. But they can also, this energy can get in a rut, doesn't like to move too quickly, doesn't like things to change so quickly. So following the fixed signs, we have the mutable cross or the mutable signs. So following Taurus, we have Gemini, and Leo, we have Virgo, and after Scorpio, we have Sagittarius, and after Aquarius, we have Pisces. And these are the adaptable, flexible energies that get us ready for the change of the next season, and around the circle we go again. Now, what's interesting is you can see on the chart that I did that you can just feel how if you're in the middle of the fixed sign, that's about as grounded and stable and creative and dense as you can get, right? And these are called cross-quarter moments. This is part of the actual Celtic seasonal celebrations or the pagan rituals that happen to coincide with Beltane, which is where we are now, which is on May 5th technically. We will sometimes change these holidays to be on a Sunday or a moon, like in this case, we do May Day and connect it with Beltane. But actually, Beltane is when the sun is at 15 degrees Taurus, which is on this year on May 5th, and then in the middle of the Leo season, then we have Lunasid, and that's then in the middle of the fall season, of course, with Scorpio. We have Samhain, and then Imbolc in the winter just before spring comes along. And I'm not going to go into the relevance and importance of these particular rituals and celebrations, but they're very, very powerful. These points in time in the middle of the 15 degrees of the fixed signs were considered and recognized as very sacred, very powerful. And even though we're flexible, that day where 15 degrees is a powerful day. So you can feel how we're very close to it. The full moon is on the 3rd and the 4th, and then Beltane, or the 15 degrees, is actually on the 5th. So the question is, what intentions and preparations, whatever we put into wanting to create during these particular times of the year has a whole lot of creativity and staying power attached to it. And it actually really reminds me of the 60s. That's what comes up for me, because the 60s were a revolution in art and music and philosophies that changed the world forever. And they were associated with the seeds of revolution that were being planted by the Uranus-Pluto conjunction. Now, these outer planetary transits, they're long-term, they affect generations, and we're just now at that first quarter 90-degree square. There's a lot of crises, a lot of stuff's coming up. It makes the 60s actually look pretty mild by comparison. I say that having been alive in the 60s and old enough to understand what was going on. And people might think, whoa, the 60s were so intense, it's not so intense now. Well, that's because we're living in it and we don't really understand how intense things really are. So, for example, in the 60s, there was still a huge middle class and people just weren't as economically stressed. Now there is no middle class to speak of. The disparity between the wealthy and the poor is huge. And in the 60s, we still thought of the government as an extended family, somebody that would protect us, that we could count on. You'd go to the embassy overseas and know you were safe. And you can't do that anymore as an American citizen, for example. The level of trust has been irreparably damaged. Trust, that's another Scorpio keyword, and so on. But it was also the beginning of this huge renaissance of beauty and music and ideas. And that is also what we are moving into, which I feel that this full moon really symbolizes in terms of another flourishing of creativity, a Renaissance period, which if you're interested at all in being part of that, surfing that big wave, it's really good to know that it's really gaining momentum. What this reminds me of in terms of how it'll show up, because it'll be very different than the 60s. We're not in the 60s anymore, as much as I wish that we were. But what's going to be different? First of all, there's this idea we have Uranus in Aries and for several more years, and then Saturn in Sagittarius for another 2-ish years. So these two influences are going to bring a really different slant to it. The Saturn in Sag has this feel of the tribe coming back to nature, natural law, and it reminds me of, an example of it is there's two young brothers who started a few years ago, and they're only now just 11 and 14, who are they've done this organization called Earth Guardians, and they're on YouTube, and they talk to environmental groups all over the world, and they've been on TED Talks, and, they're musicians, they do rap and hip hop, and I think that their father was Native American or from South America. I'm not sure which. We'd have to look that up. But essentially what they call themselves, let me just see what, I'll put links down for you in case you're interested in down. They call themselves a tribe of young activists, artists, and musicians from across the globe, stepping up as leaders and collaborating to defend our planet. So, and they are fun to watch and very serious. I mean, this Pluto and Sag generation is a very serious generation. All of the generations, starting from Pluto and Scorpio, Pluto and Sag. Anyway, they're powerful beings. But this, so there will be a flourishing and a renaissance of music and art and activism, absolutely. But it may have more of a back-to-earth feel in a different kind of way, perhaps, than the 60s. The 60s did have that element, but it was a lot more unconscious, and it wasn't directly keyed into the idea of destroying Mother Earth and the imbalances of pollution and toxicity, the toxic soup that we're all living in right now. So, and then there's this Uranus and Aries energy, which is the technology, if you were to take somebody from the 60s and put them in today, they would actually be very impressed with the progress we've made and might think they were living in Star Trek reality, because that's the way it seems. And yet this same technological flourishing is obviously going to bring some difficult challenges with it, from transhumanism that's gone awry, et cetera, but it's also the ticket to cleaning up the environment and to having cleaner energy resources, et cetera. So that's really on a clip, and it'll be that interesting juxtaposition of technology and back to balance with Mother Nature and natural law, and how do we work all that together in a way that creates a better and cleaner tomorrow. This is definitely, it's just about ready to explode in terms of people getting on board. So again, if you're feeling it and you're feeling like, yeah, I'm right, I'm about ready to ride this wave, it's not imagined, it's real. Now, back to this full moon chart with the missing table leg. Okay. What I want to do is show you that if we look up the Sabian symbol for that degree, it says a train entering a tunnel. As I wrote on here, the keynote is the ability to shortcut the process of natural evolution by the exercise of will, mental skill, and physical discipline. So this is very cool. I really related to this especially when I see people who are really wanting to go their own way, live their dream, quit a hated corporate job and do their own thing. And then they get so discouraged because nothing happens fast, and they're destitute, and they feel like it's not going to work, and they get kind of victim conscious and all of that. It's so easy to fall into that trap, and it's especially a vulnerable time right now for that kind of thing, the idea of that to be experienced. And one of the reasons is that it's sort of like three-legged table. You've got to have a solid base, that four square, the strong foundation to stand on. And we've been sort of brainwashed by New Age thinking into this idea of twinkle our nose and it happens, just have the right thoughts and it happens. But that's not what the natural law and the natural cycles and course that we see reflected both in nature and symbolically through the chart tells us. In fact, Dane Rudger goes on to say, and I'm just going to read you the whole thing, I didn't write it down. In this symbol, we see a condensation of what is implied in the three preceding ones. Man must be inspired by a vision of what is possible for him to achieve. He has to organize a schedule of necessary activities if the work is to be done in terms of successive moves, each requiring a specialized type of skill and strength, i.e. hierarchy of functions. He has to find a precipitous time for beginning the work, and the end result is an acceleration of the evolutionary process, whether at psychological level or other levels, and so on. So basically, the key word here that he uses is penetration, which is actually another really strong Scorpio keyword. It's the idea that we can combine social, cultural, and even personal techniques to shorten the time needed. But this is strategy. This is hard work. This is persistence. This is creativity. This is patience. In other words, you can't skip steps. You can't just rush to the end. That's what maybe cardinal energy wants to do. If we can be patient with the process of our lives, realizing it took a long time for things to get to be the way they are, and it might take a while to shift directions sometimes, but the depth and the angst of our general situation is also the inspiration for some amazing things coming up. The artist angst kind of energy. I think the fixed energies remind us it can happen, the quick fixes, but if we look carefully, there's usually a set of really hard work that led to the magic, sometimes decades of it. But then at a certain point of preparation and intensity, through having set the stage, having made sure the foundation is strong, then we can go through the tunnel. So the tunnel reminds me of like a wormhole. I know I watch way too much Star Trek. Like the wormhole that saves years of travel going from one point of the galaxy to the other. So we also can't ignore the aspect of Aquarius that has to do with the polarity of Leo. Leo is pretty subjective, personal creative expression. And Aquarius is more objective. And how does this benefit humanity as a whole or the collective? So the two need to be working in balance with each other, integrating both ends of the polarity. And that's part of the missing leg, is this idea of, and how is all this wonderful creative energy that's bound to blossom with just it's a natural part of this kind of cycle we're in, and how does it benefit the collective? If somebody is specifically meant to have that orientation in their chart and they do just stay with personal glorification or just being all about what they're creatively expressing, it's not going to go nearly as well for them. So I'm putting up here another Stephen Arroyo quote, which I actually did pull out of Judy Hall's book because it also matched this Aquarian theme I'm talking about around objectivity. Imagine this as a baby being born today with these energies hardwired into their DNA as their imprint. But it does apply to us collectively. We're all feeling these energies very strongly and can apply them to varying degrees according to how it's relevant to our lives. But what he says is this person needs more than anything else a concentrated program of self-transformation based on reprogramming his or her instinctive patterns in order to be able to adjust to any life experience with more flexibility and objectivity. So that's just it. If we get too personal and we lose that flexibility and objectivity, we can fall very easily into the residual dredges of feeling victimized, especially in these times. Scorpio energy is arguably the most intense of all, and this full moon is highlighting the collective shadows that the 60s revolution initiated. We're in this first quarter square, as I reminded you, crisis in action of this particular long-term cycle that's affecting all of us. It affected our parents, it'll affect our children, and so on. But we have, like I said, we've come so far, but it's all relative. Carl Jung called World War I way back in the day, 1914. The quote was a veritable witch's cauldron. It's such a Scorpio moon kind of phrase. And yet I wonder, what he would say about today. That's another big difference. In the 60s, we had a single war, the Vietnam War, and now we've got global war on every front we turn. It's just accelerated so much. So that's another example of how things are actually much tougher right now. But I feel like it's our deeper level of maturation and insight and awareness that's bringing up deeper levels of the shadow. So that's the gift of Scorpio. This energy couldn't have been handled by us poor naive young 60s people. And yet Pluto and Scorpio generation, which are my daughters, they're in their 20s. It's their life. It's all they've ever known. Kind of breaks my heart, but it's such an important and vital and creative time, and there's so much opportunity. It's such a privilege to be part of this. The journey does include going into the underworld, facing the deeper traumas, facing the deeper fears, facing the deeper issues, the life and death issues. Another gift of this Scorpio energy, which the full moon is illuminating, is that of the gift of alchemy, the alchemy of transformation, where we can know that the power is there to create the life that we want, a new world, a new future. It's not going to happen overnight. But this full moon is illuminating the gifts of Scorpio that come with deep, intense challenges, but the rewards are equally wonderful. The higher you go, the lower you fall, the lower you fall, the higher you go. Okay. All right. My brain just turned off. Happy Scorpio full moon, everyone. And yeah, if you have any feedback or comments or questions, I would really love to get conversations going at the end of these YouTubes. If you're into it, feel free. I will participate. All right. Great. Until next time. Bye for now.